I have a liver disease and need to be hospitalized. The word hospitalized from my husband Oliver's serious mouth shocked me. When I listened closely, I learned that his liver was damaged due to excessive drinking and that he might need a transplant. I didn't realize it was that serious and couldn't say anything to Oliver. My liver is in pretty bad shape, and it looks like I need a transplant. I see. I hope I'm a match as a donor. The test results showed I was a match, so I hurried to Oliver's hospital room to surprise him. But when I opened the door, I was met with a shocking sight. Emily. Oh? Are you Oliver's wife? You certainly seem like a stiff person. What? Oliver had a guilty look on his face, and the woman, who seemed to be a nurse, looked down at me with disdain. It was obvious they had a relationship beyond professional bounds. Feeling my heart pounding, I demanded an explanation from Oliver. After I get out of here, I'm going to be with her. You're no longer needed, so get out of this room. Not only was he having an affair, but he was also declaring a divorce. It was an incredible betrayal. Determined to give Oliver and his mistress what they deserved, I left the room just as they wanted. However, whatever the outcome, it was no longer my concern. My name is Emily. I'm a 32-year-old housewife. I met Oliver when I was working in customer service at a small office supply company. He was a banker who came to our office. A friend from work told me that our company had taken a loan from the bank before. I had seen Oliver then, but I didn't know him personally. Oliver's cheerful personality made him quite popular with my colleagues, which was in stark contrast to my strict and serious approach to work. At first, I felt a lot of jealousy. He also seemed uninterested in me, so we usually exchanged only brief greetings when we passed each other in the office. Hi there. Hello. You're working hard as always. Even so, I couldn't help but be impressed by his bright demeanor, although I kept my jealousy to myself. I thought having a few work friends like my colleagues was enough, but unconsciously, I started noticing Oliver more. This didn't help, and I ended up making a mistake at work that caused trouble with a client. My boss, who was surprised as it was rare for me to make mistakes, was concerned. It's unusual for you to mess up with a client. At first, I thought it was a rumor. I'm sorry. I'm not blaming you. You've always been reliable. Can I trust you to handle the situation? Yes. Feeling embarrassed and angry at myself for worrying my boss, I nodded weakly and returned to my desk. I had worked harder than anyone since joining the company as a new graduate, and I didn't want to drag everyone down here. That day, I stayed late to handle the issue, holding a one-person reflection meeting when Oliver came to the department and spoke to me. Aren't you from the bank? Do you need something? Oh, I just forgot some documents. I came to get them. I see. With that, I averted my gaze from him. I was writing down how to avoid making the same mistake again on a blank sheet of paper. Then, his voice sounded impressed. When I realized he was still there, I glared at him in surprise, and Oliver apologized with a sheepish look on his face. Sorry. I thought you were very meticulous. Don't you have something you forgot? I think you have more important things to do than bothering with me. My words might have come out a bit cold, but given that I was feeling down about a work failure and had someone nearby who made me feel jealous, it was only natural that my tone got a bit harsh. I tried to convince myself of this, but when I looked at the silent Oliver, I thought maybe I had gone too far. Then Oliver smiled and said, "You are strict and serious about your work. It's a good thing, but I think it's also important to take a break once in a while." Yes, that's true. He doesn't know anything about me, yet he says whatever he likes. He's probably just trying to be kind. But at that moment, I didn't have the emotional capacity to consider such things. We weren't that close, and it felt intrusive and uncomfortable that he was trying to get inside my personal space. So, I couldn't believe what Oliver said next. "You don't believe me, do you? When I had trouble with a client, I used to have solo reflection sessions." What? That was unexpected. People like him, who are trusted by those around them and lift everyone's spirits, didn't seem like the type to reflect on things alone. But the look on Oliver's face when he said it was so similar to mine that I knew he was telling the truth. "If you want, why don't you tell me what happened? Talking about it might make you feel better, and you might come up with a good idea." Seeing his serious expression, I found myself agreeing before I knew it. Oliver went to retrieve what he had forgotten first, and we decided to talk over dinner outside. I waited at my desk. What is he planning? The dining place was a private room in a rather upscale restaurant. I felt uneasy because I don't usually go to such places. Oliver seemed to notice that and laughed a little, making me blush as I glared at him. Sorry. You just looked so out of place that I found it cute." "Cute?" I stood up, raising my voice more than I expected, and started to worry about the people around us. But since we were in a private room, there was no need to worry, and I sat back down. From that point on, Oliver led the conversation, and when I talked about how I was handling the trouble at work, he gave very precise advice. It was hard to imagine this side of Oliver from his usual behavior. He seemed intellectual and thoughtful. Maybe this is the real him, a capable man at work. Thanks to Oliver's advice, the trouble was resolved, so I thought I should thank him. However, Oliver was very popular among the employees, and I thought it might be annoying if someone like me, who usually doesn't talk to him, suddenly did, so I waited for the right moment. Finally, the opportunity came. When I thanked him for his help, he smiled and told me not to worry about it. "Well, how about you invite me to dinner as thanks? That's the condition for accepting your gratitude." "All right. I'll invite you sometime." He said he'd be waiting for my invitation, waving as he left the office. I didn't feel like having dinner with a male friend, but leaving a debt unpaid was even worse. So a week later, I invited him, and he immediately agreed. Since it was our day off, it almost felt like a date. He exuded the calm and reassuring demeanor of a gentleman, and I was surprised at how comfortable I felt around him. I used to be so jealous of him, who was different from me in every way, but now, we're practically going on dates. After that, having dinner once a month became our regular event, and a year later, he asked me out. "I've been drawn to your strict and serious nature, and the way you become cute when flustered. I think we can be great partners, so I want to date you with marriage in mind. Maybe I've been attracted to you without realizing it. Yes, let's date." And so, our relationship began. Oliver taught me about places and things I didn't know, and it made me happy to see him trying to make me enjoy myself. As our relationship progressed over the years, I even began to think we could get married. Little did I know, our happiness was about to crumble. One day, after a date, as I was about to go home, he stopped me and proposed with a ring. Of course, I immediately accepted since my mind was already made up. We had a wedding with blessings from our parents and colleagues, and it didn't feel real during the ceremony since I never thought I would get married. However, once we decided on a house and started living together, it suddenly hit me that we were really married. From now on, I aimed to be a wife who could devote herself to Oliver. When we discussed it before marriage, Oliver said he would be happy to have someone to support him, so I decided to become a housewife. It wasn't an easy decision to leave a job I had dedicated myself to. But I was happy to be needed by Oliver and thought of it as repaying his kindness to me, so I decided to quit my job, despite my colleagues and employees regretting it. At that time, my boss told me I could come back anytime, and I was grateful to realize that I was more needed at the company than I thought. I never expected you to marry Oliver from our business partner. And it's surprising that it's you. I think so too. I used to dislike him, thinking he had a frivolous personality, but you never know what life will bring. After thanking my boss for all the help, I finished handing over my duties and left the company. Looking at the building where the company was located, I felt a pang of sadness even though I wasn't leaving for good, and I headed home to brush off that feeling. Our married life was smooth, with him always thanking me, and we continued our monthly dining out, looking forward to possibly having children someday. However, it was 1 year into our marriage when he started to change. He began to treat me as if I were a housekeeper, asking for chores and complaining about the housework. Of course, I couldn't stay silent, so I retorted, "You're annoying. Just listen to what I say and quietly do the housework. You're a housewife, so taking care of me shouldn't be a big deal. You asked me to be a housewife, but now you're saying this. If you hated it so much, you should have refused." Snorting, he looked away from me and started fiddling with his smartphone. What on earth happened to him? Though I was angry at his words, I thought something might have happened at work. But I knew that if I probed too deeply, it would only worsen his mood and damage our relationship. That day, I gave up on talking to him and decided to wait for another day when he was calmer to ask about things. However, from then on, his domineering behavior at home only accelerated, and he became more stringent with time. He began complaining if the shower wasn't ready at his exact timing. "I told you to have the shower ready when I come home from work. Can't you even do that simple thing?" "Well, I'm doing housework and other errands you asked for, so I don't always have the time." "If you have such a problem, why don't you do it yourself?" "What? Are you saying it's my fault? You're blaming me too now." Another time, when I brought coffee to Oliver's study, he not only complained about the timing but also the taste, berating me. "Maybe you think it's easy being a housewife, but I'm tired from work every day, and I'm sick of hearing your complaints. Then you could at least help me out a little? I understand you're tired or busy with work, but on your days off, you could take over some chores." "What? I want to use my days off for myself. I don't want to waste time on that. Now, go make a new pot of coffee." There was no point in talking that day either, so I quietly went to make new coffee. How did it come to this? The happy days of our early marriage now felt like a distant past. Despite my repeated attempts to have discussions with him, he dismissed the need for any talks, saying that a housewife is practically the maid of the husband. He ignored me, always engrossed in his smartphone, with a smirk on his face. Moreover, to escape my pursuit, he increased the number of outings he called drinking parties. Now, he doesn't come home until late at night more than 10 times a month. Our monthly dinner together had ceased without me noticing, and I was shocked. It's unusual for a banker like him to go out for drinks so often, raising my suspicions considering his usual behavior. Sometimes, he came home heavily drunk, supported by a subordinate from work, and became particularly aggressive towards me. I had no choice but to wait until he fell asleep to calm down. "You're so cute, totally different from my wife." But I'm married, after all. What is that about? Is it about a game? When in a good mood or drunk, he would say similar things. Having once seen him play a smartphone game featuring beautiful female characters, I had my doubts but didn't pay much attention. One day, he came home from work with a serious face and said he needed to talk to me in the living room. "Actually, I've developed a liver disease and need to be hospitalized." "What?" The word hospitalization shook me up considerably. Although Oliver had changed, I couldn't imagine him being sick due to his naturally bright personality. When I listened to Oliver in detail, he said his liver had been damaged from drinking too much, and he might need a transplant. I hadn't realized it was that severe, and I couldn't find words to say to him. I'll be hospitalized for a while, so I'll have to take a leave from work. I plan to pay the hospitalization fees from my savings, but if it drags on, I'll need you to help pay too. Okay. It was the first time I saw him, usually so overbearing, looking down and dejected. But we couldn't afford to be leisurely. If the disease was quite severe, Oliver might have to quit his job. The hospitalization costs could continue indefinitely, raising concerns about living expenses. I understand, leave it to me. Even though I was dissatisfied with his attitude, I had decided to support him and couldn't do anything halfway, so I decided to return to work. However, returning to the company as a full-time employee was not realistic because of him and our living situation. So, I consulted my boss about the possibility of working from home on a freelance basis. I see. Our company is considering introducing remote work on a trial basis right now, so it's perfect timing. With your track record at the company, you're more than qualified, and we would actually like to ask you to do it. Thank you very much. Understanding our circumstances, nothing could be more encouraging. Receiving the expected positive response from my boss over the phone, I felt relieved to have secured our living foundation for the time being. Thanks to this, even after Oliver was hospitalized, I could work from home and visit him 3 times a week, giving me enough time to think about improving our marriage. My liver is in pretty bad shape, and it looks like I'll need a transplant. Oh. I hope they find a donor. The test results indicated that a liver transplant was necessary, and Oliver asked me to get tested to see if I could be a suitable donor, so I decided to undergo the test. This was because when Oliver was admitted to the hospital, he confided something to me. Recently, work hasn't been going well. And a little while ago, I made a big mistake and the company told me to take responsibility for it. This is the first time I'm hearing about it. Why didn't you tell me? I didn't want to worry you. Oh, I see. Before Oliver started trying to control everything at home, he never showed weakness or relied on me for anything. That had gradually become a burden and stress for him. He tried to make up for his mistake, but it didn't work out, and he eventually turned to alcohol for escape. Although I hadn't been told about it, I didn't know that Oliver was struggling with such worries, and I realized that this was the cause of his drastic change. I'm sorry for being harsh without knowing. True, when I couldn't relax at work, coming home and having you snap at me made it feel like I had no place to be at ease, so I turned to drinking. But still, I wish you had confided in me. I always thought that marriage was about supporting each other, and while I was focused on supporting Oliver, I might not have considered his feelings. As I was unable to say anything, he concluded with these words. I'm sorry I didn't tell you. But I wanted you to consider my feelings too. It's okay. If we made mistakes, we can start over again. These words were more for myself than for Oliver. Indeed, his attitude might have had some issues, but reflecting on myself, I resolved to have better conversations from now on. When I found out that I was a suitable donor, I hurried to the hospital room to surprise and make Oliver happy. Then, I heard voices coming from inside and stopped in my tracks. I couldn't hear the content of the conversation, but he seemed to be talking to a woman and sounded quite familiar. Maybe it was a colleague from his company? I decided to wait in front of the hospital room until the conversation was over, but after an hour had passed without anyone coming out, I had a bad feeling and prepared my smartphone before opening the door to the hospital room, revealing a surprising scene. Emily. Oh, you must be Oliver's wife? You certainly seem like a strict person. What? What is this? Oliver had an awkward expression, while the woman who appeared to be a nurse looked down on me with a disdainful expression. The situation made it glaringly obvious that they were more than just colleagues. Feeling my heart pounding fiercely, I demanded an explanation from him. What on earth is going on? Oh well, now that you've found out, there's nothing we can do. I'm going to be with her. I'm so happy. While they were basking in their romantic moment, my heart was boiling with anger like molten lava. Oliver, mistaking my shock for something else, decided to push the divorce papers in front of me and suggest we part ways. Once I get out of the hospital, I'll be with her, so you're no longer needed. Can you leave this hospital soon? I feel destined to be with him. I'm sorry for taking your husband. As the reality of the divorce declaration set in, I felt my long-standing frustration reach its peak, and any love I had for Oliver began to dissipate. I couldn't forgive him for having an affair without any remorse. They say that extreme anger can make you unusually calm, but I never imagined I'd experience it firsthand. Feeling nauseous at the sight of the two of them cozying up, I steeled myself for retribution and left the hospital room. What followed turned his hospital room into a scene one would want to look away from. Back home, overwhelmed by anger and sadness from his betrayal, I cried for a few minutes. Had I done something wrong? However, knowing that Oliver had no love for me, I had no intention of turning back. Once I regained my composure, I started preparing for the divorce and my retribution against him. A month later, having completed all my preparations, I headed to the front door for my final goodbye to the house I shared with Oliver. Just as I was about to leave, my smartphone rang loudly, showing Oliver's number. Ignoring it several times, I finally answered, only to be met with immediate blame. Why aren't you visiting me? Can't you at least bring my clothes and the things I want? You're making my life in the hospital miserable. As a housewife, you should at least take care of me. What are you talking about? You told me not to show my face, so I was just following your orders. I was surprised at the cold tone of my own voice in response to Oliver's nonsensical remarks. I thought his unreasonable scolding might make me shrink back, but a month had been enough time to move on. Oliver sighed in exasperation at my words and started saying that he had been joking back then. You took my words seriously, and that's why you declared a divorce. I knew I made the right choice to be with her. Even though I hadn't prompted it, Oliver started boasting about her and laughing at how inferior I was compared to her. I thought about hanging up, but his next words shocked me to my core. Oh, by the way, she told me you're a compatible donor, so I need you to help me out. What? Honestly, it's irresponsible not to inform me about your compatibility. You should go back to elementary school. What was he talking about? I couldn't believe that my ex-husband was asking me to donate to him when the divorce papers had already been accepted. While I had tried to comply with him during our marriage, he was gravely mistaken if he thought he could still treat me like a toy. There isn't a single organ I'd give to someone who's completely unrelated to me now. And I'm not so kind-hearted as to take care of someone who betrayed my dedication in the worst way possible with an affair. More than anything, it was absurd to think I could ever trust my ex-husband again. I unleashed all the pent-up frustration, anger, and betrayed sadness I had been holding back. Oliver hadn't expected me to go this far, and he was so shaken that he couldn't say a word. Of course, I refuse to be your donor, and I won't be taking care of you. You'd better find happiness with your affair partner. As I continued to lash out, he finally seemed to snap back to reality and called me heartless. It's highly questionable whether Oliver even had the right to say such things. How could you speak to me like this when I'm still your family? If I die because of this, it will be your fault. You still won't be my donor? Family, right. At the beginning of our marriage, I did see Oliver as family. But once he transformed into a tyrant, treating me like a servant, he erased all those feelings. Ignoring all the abuse and infidelity he had inflicted on me, and now trying to impose his demands was just too convenient. Sorry, but after all you've done and your affair, I can't see you as family anymore, nor do I want to. What? What do you think a person's life is worth? If I don't go back to work, you won't be able to live on your own. I never thought you were such a cold-hearted woman. That's exactly what I should be saying to him. Everyone knows that human life is precious, and maybe normally, I should be willing to donate without a second thought. But reality isn't that simple. Especially in my current situation, moral lectures had no effect on me. Just then, the woman who had been standing by his side, his affair partner, chimed in with a voice dripping with insincerity. I agree with Oliver. As a nurse, I'm telling you, you need to donate. After it's done, you can go wherever you want. The switch of anger flipped inside me, and with no more feelings left for either of them, I felt no guilt about my plan. At that moment, I heard the sound of the hospital room door being flung open through the phone, and the two of them gasped in surprise. What is the meaning of this? So it's true. Weren't you going to marry me? From the voices, I could tell there were multiple women, and he seemed to recognize what was happening. This was one of my plans for retribution. The day after he threw me out of the hospital room, I began to wonder if there were other women he was cheating with, so I hired a detective and used social media to reach out to potential victims. Just like me, these women had been approached when they were vulnerable and were led into relationships, each in different ways, but ultimately ending up involved with him. Without realizing it, I had fallen into a trap. As a result, his hospital room turned into a scene I could barely stand to look at. You all have been betrayed by Oliver, just like I was. Even though I'm his wife, I want to punish him in the way that hurts him the most now that we know his true nature. They might not believe me, but I needed him to face justice. Asking them for help out of the blue, without giving them time to process everything, was probably too much. But I couldn't back down now and ignore his victims, nor could I give up. One woman agreed to help, and that decision quickly spread, leading everyone to join in. As I prepared to exact my revenge on him, I shared all the terrible things he had done, and as they listened in disbelief, their expressions gradually turned to anger, declaring they would never forgive him. And that leads us to the present. What are you talking about? I don't know you people. That's a lie. There's no way I'd mistake the face of the person who picked up my wallet that day. It's too late to pretend you don't know us now. We're the victims group. And you know exactly who the leader is. No way. Oliver seemed to realize that I was the leader of the victims group, and in his shock, he dropped his smartphone from the bed. One of the victimized women picked it up, switched to a video call, and spoke to me. Emily, there were some unexpected things, but can we start? Of course. I wanted to join in person, but we can proceed with Oliver's punishment even this way. Even though he hadn't been persistently calling today, it was the day we planned to execute our punishment. Oliver's pointless chatter had delayed us, and we almost missed the scheduled time. However, even through the screen, we could see him and the other woman, so I returned to the living room and listened to the conversation from the hospital room. We all intend to sue you. If you have any excuses, let's hear them now. Just so you know, we won't show any mercy, so be prepared. Hey, who are these people? Aren't they being too rude to you? Well, you see. In the end, with no sense of crisis, the other woman and the victimized women cornered Oliver, who, struggling to find words, finally managed to speak. But then, he started making excuses. It's true that I loved you all. But the stress from work failures led me to reach out to various women. It wasn't something I wanted to do. We could all see through his fake tears, leaving all of us, including myself, in stunned silence. The truth was that the story about his work failure was half true, half lie. He had been demoted after being caught trying to hit on a woman at work by his boss. We learned this from his colleagues when we were looking for other victims, which made me feel doubly betrayed. I resorted to drinking, wandering around bars all day, venting about work, and meeting with you. But it was all to soothe my loneliness. I needed it. Oliver's attempts to justify himself made me feel nauseous. It seemed his usually cheerful personality was just a mask he wore to make such excuses, making me trust him even less. As Oliver became more talkative, spewing hollow words to gain our forgiveness, I played a recording that changed the atmosphere in the hospital room. The recording contained the conversation when he kicked me out, mentioning the victimized women. Divorcing this person is fine, but there are others who love you too, right? Will you properly break it off with them? I'm worried. Don't worry. The women here are just temporary. I plan to break up with them when the time is right. Honestly, they're not my type, so I intended to end things soon. Despite me standing right there, they talked as if I didn't exist, so I recorded everything. I had suspected his infidelity before opening the hospital room door that day, but I wanted to believe in him until the truth was confirmed. I never imagined it would come to this, but having this recording was incredibly useful for my revenge on Oliver, so I decided to use it to my advantage. A person with moral integrity doesn't cheat with multiple women or treat his wife poorly. And by the way, if you're worried about how I'm doing, I'm working from home now, so I'm not having any issues. What? When I interrupted, Oliver froze, staying silent for a while. He realized that the only person on his side was his mistress, and his face turned pale. Watching him through the screen with pity, I saw Oliver tell his mistress to say something back. Huh? It's the truth, so what? Anyway, let's talk about our future married life. I'm so excited about it. Was she reminiscing about her life with him, or was she simply lost in her own world while responding to Oliver's words without arguing back? At that moment, another nurse, who had overheard the commotion in his hospital room, seemed to have brought the director of nursing. The scene was shocking, making anyone want to look away. However, when it became clear that the central figure was the woman having an affair, the director sighed in exasperation and groaned. When one of the victimized women explained the situation between the cheating woman and her husband, the director of nursing decided to fire the nurse on the spot. Yay! If Oliver gets better, that means I get to live my dream of being a housewife, right? Finally, my luck is turning around. It seemed she was happy about losing her job, oblivious to her situation. Her abnormality was beyond my imagination. In contrast, Oliver appeared to be in despair, and I ended the call with a final parting shot. Now you suffer the consequences for neglecting and betraying women. Perhaps I had foreseen his tragic end. The story after I hung up was recounted by a friend who happened to be visiting her father in the hospital and witnessed the scene. The woman having the affair was fired and sued for alimony by the victimized woman, but she seemed optimistic, relying on Oliver's earnings. However, his phone rang, and he was fired by his boss when the affair was exposed. Upon hearing this, she abruptly changed and broke up with him. The company's reputation was at stake, which could affect the bank's credibility, so it was a natural response. She had this furious look, saying it wasn't what she signed up for, and that she only considered marrying him because he was a banker. In the end, it was all about the money. So what did he do? It's really pathetic. He begged her not to leave, pleading for her to stay. But she had her eyes set on wealthy patients in the hospital, so she ignored him completely. I began to understand why the director of nursing looked so troubled at that moment. I knew it would come to this. It's his own fault. Eventually, Oliver and the cheating woman broke up. In a desperate attempt, he tried to contact me to reconcile, but I had already changed my number. Oliver's reputation spread within the industry, making it hard for him to find a new job. He's now juggling part-time jobs to pay the alimony. The other day, I ran into him at a convenience store counter. It made me feel so bad I decided never to go there again. What happened to the woman he was cheating with? I heard she disappeared. However, the victimized woman confirmed that the alimony payments were still being made, so there was no need for concern. It's no longer my concern, and I have no intention of worrying about it. I still keep in touch with the members of the support group for victims, and we're determined to turn this story into something we can laugh about. I moved out of the house I shared with him, and now I enjoy a carefree single life, working from home. By now, they're probably struggling in their misery, hopefully learning a bit about how it feels to be betrayed. I'm going to be a grandma soon. I'm eagerly looking forward to being there for my daughter Alana's first childbirth, but it's a strange mix of excitement and anxiety. Next week, I had plans to take a short trip. There's still 2 weeks until the due date. But I was debating whether I should go, just in case something happens. Contrary to my anxiety, my husband Lawrence readily agreed. The day after I arrived back home by plane, I saw a photo on Alana's social media. In the picture, Alana was holding her newborn baby. Next to her stood Lawrence, forming a happy 3-generation family photo. What's this? The due date was supposed to be 2 weeks from now. Did it come early? And neither Lawrence nor Alana had contacted me. Was the due date I was told a lie? Once again, I was left out. As if to add insult to injury, my smartphone rang. It was Lawrence. Hey! What are you doing? Helping after childbirth is the mother's job. I immediately heard his angry voice. Labor started. The baby was born. The first words to me, left out of this important moment, were, "What are you doing? Hurry back." Of course, I want to help Alana and see my grandchild. But how long do I plan to continue this life with Lawrence? Maybe I've reached my limit. Ah, that's right. Understood. The real mother is on her way. What? I hung up without answering and stood up. Where is the place I feel most at ease? As I was hanging the laundry, I saw a cat yawning comfortably on the stone wall, and I thought about it. Lately, it feels like I've been spending more time looking out the window as a form of escapism from these unresolved feelings. I used to have the most fun just being with friends. Just seeing everyone's faces made me feel at ease. I nostalgically remembered my high school days, long ago. I am Kristen. I don't have a place where I can truly relax. Even at home, my mind is constantly occupied with doing all the housework perfectly, leaving no time to rest. Excuse me. Can I go buy some sauce and eggs? Sure. What time and which store are you planning to go? Oh, around 2 p.m. to that supermarket. Even though we've been living together for so long, I still get nervous having conversations because I have to be overly mindful. That's because my husband Lawrence can be quite a controlling husband. It's expected to prepare breakfast before waking him up, to have dinner and a shower ready before he comes home. Asking for permission to go shopping is a norm in our household. If I went out without asking, not only would he be in a bad mood, but who knows what would happen. I don't have the courage to go out without asking, so I just do the daily chores without upsetting Lawrence. And ending each day without knowing what peace feels like has become my daily routine. Having lived isolated from the outside world for so long, now in my late middle age, the thought of divorce scares me. When I first married Lawrence, I loved cooking his favorite meals and eagerly awaited his return. I felt happy taking care of him, from offering words of appreciation to preparing his pajamas and work clothes. I felt like loving him by being attentive and devoted. I made something light for you today. My stomach was feeling heavy. Thank you. Lawrence would always thank me for everything I did, making me feel even more fulfilled. But those happy times didn't last very long. Even though we lived our lives the same way as always, Lawrence became less and less appreciative of what I did. His gaze turned critical, and he no longer tolerated even the smallest mistakes. My life changed dramatically from that day. It was right after I finished preparing dinner when I realized I had forgotten to buy toilet paper. Lawrence wasn't due back yet, and since the store was close by, I decided to run out quickly to get it. I managed to get the shopping done and hurried back home. Huh? The door is unlocked. Panicking, I rushed inside to find that Lawrence had come home earlier than expected. Hey, where have you been? You're home early today. Answer me. Where were you and what were you doing? I went to the store to buy some toilet paper because we ran out. Lawrence was in an unusually bad mood. It was still early in the evening, a time when even teenagers wouldn't be expected to be home yet, but he couldn't tolerate that I wasn't there. I regretted not letting him know to avoid worrying him. I'm sorry. I should have called to let you know. Leaving the house without telling me is unacceptable. From now on, no unnecessary outings. You must get my permission for everything, even shopping. I couldn't tell if he said this in a fit of anger or if he truly meant it. But I didn't want to upset him further, so I apologized and tried to calm the situation. However, from that day, the control over my life became much stricter. Before, I would combine necessary shopping with personal errands, but even that was now deemed unnecessary. Going out for coffee with friends was out of the question. I felt like a bird trapped in a cage, with Lawrence controlling all aspects of my freedom. Since everything was monitored, I often wondered why I had to endure such treatment. Naturally, my love for Lawrence began to fade. Despite this, I had something in my life that I was fully committed to. That was raising my only daughter, Alana. Separated from the outside world and living a constrained life, Alana was my everything. Mom. I remember how overjoyed I was when she first called me. As she started school, I spent my time attending parent-teacher meetings, school events, and driving her to and from extracurricular activities. Lawrence showed no interest in Alana's school activities or extracurriculars and didn't help at all, so I handled everything. Despite living a life so centered around Alana, she only listened to what Lawrence said. Teenage girls can be difficult to handle. Even so, her distant attitude broke my heart. Alana's attitude didn't change as she entered high school. Alana, stop by my place after school tomorrow. Okay, got it. As she settled into high school life, Lawrence began calling Alana to his workplace more frequently. Lawrence ran a construction business passed down through generations. Being the third generation, Lawrence saw Alana as the only potential successor. He probably intended for Alana to take over the business one day. I've never seen Alana rebel against her father. I found myself envious of their close relationship. I thought Alana would work well with Lawrence. But I wondered if Alana had other aspirations or dreams she wanted to pursue. Since she didn't talk to me much, I couldn't ask her about school or her future plans, even though I was curious. As she approached 11th grade, the time to finalize her future path drew near. Lawrence was calling Alana to his workplace more frequently than before. This week, she had already gone 3 days in a row. After dinner, Lawrence headed for a shower, and with Alana still in the living room, now was my chance. "Hey, Alana. It's almost time for your career counseling, right? How are you thinking about your future? Today, I really want to talk to Alana about her future plans. I want to ask if she has a specific career in mind." Contrary to my intentions, I carefully chose these words, hoping they would make it easier for Alana to answer without feeling uncomfortable. After a short pause, Alana finally responded. "I think I'll work at Dad's company." Without making eye contact, Alana said this. I wanted to continue the conversation, but I couldn't see her expression, so I didn't have the courage to say anything more, and the conversation ended there. Just then, Lawrence came out of the shower and crossed paths with Alana. "Alana, you can come by tomorrow too, right? I have something after school tomorrow. Do you think you can get a job with that attitude? I'll come by a little late, but I'll be there." I thought he was asking too much of her, but it wasn't my place to say anything. I felt sorry for Alana, but I couldn't say anything since I was only listening from a distance. A few days later, when I passed by Alana doing her homework in the living room, I saw a career sheet indicating she would take over Dad's company. Alana seemed to feel some pressure from her father and had no choice but to make up her mind. I couldn't help but think that if I had more influence, Alana might have pursued a career she loved. But if Alana genuinely wanted to take over the company, I wanted to support her. And so, after graduating high school, Alana joined Lawrence's company. At first, she seemed exhausted from the unfamiliar environment, but she gradually got used to it. Since we didn't talk about work at home, I couldn't tell how she was doing. All I could do was put my heart into preparing lunch and dinner to give Alana some strength. That's all I could do for her. A few years after starting her job, Alana apparently got a boyfriend at work. Lawrence seemed to like him a lot. "Tomorrow, my boyfriend is coming for dinner." "Really? Does he have any food preferences?" "I don't think so." "Okay, I'll prepare something by tomorrow then." Her curt response still made me happy because we could have a normal conversation. And even more so, I was thrilled that Alana was bringing her boyfriend home. I felt excited to put extra effort into tomorrow's dinner. Before bed, I did a little prep work and fell asleep with excitement. The next day, Lawrence, Alana, and her boyfriend came home together. Alana's boyfriend seemed very serious and friendly. Lawrence was happy to have his subordinate at our house and enthusiastically talked about work, drinking more than usual. I just watched them talk about work with a friendly smile. Alana's boyfriend tried to talk to me several times, but Lawrence's conversation never stopped, so he left without us having a proper conversation. He seemed like a really nice person. I said to Alana, who was helping with the cleanup, but she didn't seem to hear me over the sound of washing dishes. As time passed, Alana and her boyfriend decided to get married. With the marriage, Alana moved out, and it was just Lawrence and me again. Even with just the two of us, things were the same as always, with Lawrence managing everything, and our days were the same as before. The only change was that I had one less person to prepare lunch and dinner for. Today, we're having a meeting with Alana and her fiancé, so prepare dinner. Understood. Alana and her fiancé were getting married in 2 months. They were coming over tonight to discuss and plan the wedding. While thinking about the dinner menu, I smiled as I imagined Alana in her wedding dress. She must look so beautiful as a bride. I wonder what kind of wedding it will be. I'm really looking forward to it. I prepared for their visit while thinking about this. I'm home. Seeing Alana for the first time in a while, I was relieved to see she seemed as lively as ever. Let's talk after we eat for now. After saying that, Lawrence, Alana, and my husband started talking after dinner. I quickly finished cleaning up, intending to join the conversation, but it progressed so quickly that I couldn't find an opening to join in. I felt like I was being left out. Sitting beside them, I just listened in bewilderment to the conversation I couldn't follow. In the end, I was neither consulted nor involved in any discussions until the day of the wedding. But I told myself that just being able to attend the wedding and see my daughter in her dress was enough, and I headed to the venue. The ceremony began, and Alana appeared in her wedding dress. Wrapped in a pure white dress, Alana looked incredibly beautiful, beyond words. Lawrence, sitting next to me, was also gazing at Alana with a look of satisfaction. Alana, whom I had raised like my own daughter, was finally leaving the nest to start her own family. I felt a mix of happiness and sadness, a strange feeling. To think that little Alana had grown up so beautifully and was showing us her stunning dress. I was so moved I couldn't let go of my handkerchief. A few years after the emotional ceremony, Alana decided to move nearby and set up a new home. And it seems Alana's baby is due in the fall. Really? We're finally going to have a grandchild. Hearing the double good news from Lawrence about Alana moving nearby and having a baby made me ecstatic. In the midst of my joy, I felt a tinge of sadness that Alana hadn't told me directly. But that didn't matter compared to how happy I was. Even Lawrence, who usually doesn't show much emotion, seemed happy. Although Alana still acted distant towards me, just knowing she would be living nearby gave me peace of mind. No matter how distant she might act, or even if she didn't like me, she was still my precious daughter. I wanted to support her and help her whenever she needed it. That's how I felt as a mother. As the heat of summer continued, Alana and her family finished moving. Although they started living nearby, they didn't visit often, so it didn't quite feel like they were close. Around that time, I received a letter addressed to me in the mail. I recognized the sender's name but couldn't clearly remember who it was. I decided to open the letter. It was an invitation to a high school reunion. The sender was a high school classmate. No wonder the name looked familiar. A reunion, huh? I wonder how everyone is doing. I'd love to see them again. I reminisced about my high school days while looking at the letter. The reunion would be held locally after a long time. My hometown is a flight away, not exactly close. It would take a few days to go and come back, so a day trip wasn't feasible. The reunion date was 2 weeks before Alana's due date. I'd have to leave home for a few days, and Alana's due date was approaching. I wanted to attend the reunion, but I hesitated. And even if it was for a reunion, I wasn't sure if Lawrence would allow me to go out. It took a lot of courage for me to bring it up with Lawrence. I thought he would say no, but I decided to mention the reunion. Hoping he wouldn't get upset, I decided to talk to him during dinner. "Honey, I need to talk to you." The moment I said that, I met Lawrence's gaze and felt nervous. I felt a cold sweat coming on. Pretending not to be agitated, I continued. "There seems to be a high school reunion in October. But I would be away for a few days, and Alana's due date is close." I couldn't say I wanted to go outright, so I mumbled. Lawrence's reaction was unexpected. "That's fine. Of course, you should go." He said it in an unusually calm voice. I was surprised by Lawrence's response, thinking he would surely object. "Really? Is it okay? But what about Alana?" "Don't worry about the details. Just go." He readily agreed to me going to the reunion. I was delighted to see a glimpse of the gentle Lawrence from the past. I couldn't wait for that day to come. Then, the day before the reunion, Lawrence drove me to the station. "Take your time and relax." I was a little taken aback by Lawrence's unexpected words. But I felt a surge of excitement at the thought of being free for the first time in a long while. With Lawrence's usual expressionless face behind me, I headed towards the boarding gate. The view from the plane is one of my favorite sights. As I watched the scenery flow by and reminisced, I suddenly arrived at my hometown. The next day, on the way to the reunion, I saw some kids from my old school, which made me feel nostalgic. "Hey, long time no see. Do you remember me?" In the middle of the reunion, a woman approached me. "Oh, long time no see. Of course, I remember you. How have you been?" Her name was Brianna, Lawrence's ex-wife. Brianna was a classmate in high school, and Lawrence was an upperclassman at the same school. I had feelings for Lawrence since I was in high school. But eventually, Lawrence started dating Brianna. I continued to secretly like Lawrence even while they were dating. When I heard they got married, I accepted it with a sense of resignation but was also shocked. Still, I couldn't give up my feelings for Lawrence. Years later, while visiting my hometown, I coincidentally ran into Lawrence, who was also visiting. There, I learned that he had divorced Brianna, and we found out we both lived in the same city far from home. We grew close quickly and eventually got married, fulfilling my long-held feelings. More importantly, look at this. "Kristen, shouldn't you be with her?" Brianna showed me her smartphone screen. On it was a picture of Alana holding a newborn baby. Next to them stood Lawrence, all of them looking happy together. "What? When was this photo taken? What's going on? It was posted yesterday." What Brianna showed me was a photo on Alana's social media. The birth had happened earlier than expected, and I started to panic inside. From the photo, Alana looked healthy. I was relieved to see that she had given birth without any problems. Thinking I must have gotten a notification about the birth, I checked my smartphone. There's no message. Neither Lawrence nor Alana had contacted me at all. At that moment, a thought crossed my mind. Could it be that the reason Lawrence had so readily let me attend the reunion was because he didn't want me to be present for Alana's birth? Did he deliberately send me away when he knew it would coincide with her due date? Allowing me to go to the reunion was so out of character for Lawrence, who usually monitored my activities so strictly. I should have suspected something was amiss. I called Lawrence. "Alana gave birth, I heard. Why didn't you tell me? If you had informed me as soon as she went into labor, I would have rushed back immediately." Lawrence responded calmly. "Well, you're not blood-related, so it doesn't concern you, does it?" I was at a loss for words, shocked that he would bring up blood relations. We had lived together for so many years, become like a real family, and yet I was still considered an outsider. "But I've been the one taking care of Alana all this time. I've spent more time with her than you have. It doesn't matter. Alana didn't want you there either." Hearing that Alana didn't want me there was a blow, and I hung up the phone feeling deeply hurt. Yes, Alana's biological mother was Brianna, not me, the one standing right in front of me. But since the day I married Lawrence, I had tried to be a mother to Alana, giving her all the love I could muster. And until she reached her teenage years, I thought we had been as close as a real mother and daughter. It pained me deeply to realize that all my efforts and love had not reached her. "Let's talk once the reunion is over." With that, I left the reunion with Brianna. Sitting on a park bench, I told Brianna about Alana not wanting me to be there. "It's good for a father and daughter to be close, but she became distant with me around middle school. I thought it was just a phase, but even as an adult, she hasn't changed. I could never understand why, and I've never talked about it with anyone. It felt good to finally express my feelings about Alana. Do you know why I divorced Lawrence? I work as a lawyer, and I continued working even after Alana was born. Brianna began to share her story from when Alana was born. When Alana started preschool, my career was taking off, and I was away from home a lot. At that time, I was earning more than Lawrence. But he didn't like it. Lawrence seemed to feel inferior as Brianna's career surpassed his own. He claimed my work was affecting Alana's upbringing and tried to make me quit. But I didn't want to give up my job, so I brought up the idea of divorce. I planned to raise Alana on my own. However, Lawrence had no intention of giving Brianna custody. Lawrence apparently used his authority and influence to manipulate Alana into choosing him. Young Alana, not understanding she was being manipulated, chose to live with her father instead of her mother. When Alana told me, "Mom doesn't love me. I'm happier with Dad," it was a severe shock. Even if it wasn't her true feelings, a child's words can cut deeply. For a mother who gave birth to and loves her child, it must have been unimaginably painful. Believing Alana's words, Brianna decided to divorce and give up custody. But she admitted she had always regretted it.
What? That happened? I had no idea. That's terrible.
I couldn't hide my shock at learning how Lawrence had manipulated young Alana against Brianna, leading to their divorce. But when I heard he remarried you, I felt a bit relieved. You're kind and I knew you could handle it. I thought my role was done. Alana is grown up now, and seeing you now made me want to reach out. Brianna and I shared our pasts that were hard to talk about, and it eased some of my worries. Suddenly, my phone rang loudly. It's from Lawrence. I wanted to talk more with Brianna, so I decided not to answer. Brianna, can I tell you something? I told her that Lawrence wouldn't allow unnecessary outings, that I had to get his permission for shopping locations, times, and contents, and that I couldn't argue back.
What? That's unbelievable. That's completely abusive. You could definitely sue him.
Brianna was shocked at how much more extreme Lawrence's behavior was compared to when she was married. She was very indignant, as if it were her own situation, and couldn't hold back her feelings.
Alana's attitude towards you is definitely his fault. Let's go talk to him together. I can't stand that he's treating you like this.
Just as she stood up, my phone rang again. It was Lawrence again. I answered, and he immediately started speaking.
Hey! What are you doing? Helping after childbirth is the mother's job. When are you coming back?
He was trying to push the motherly duties on me, even though he said I wasn't real family earlier. He had told me to take my time and relax, yet now he was being selfish again, and I couldn't help but sigh. I always knew he was overbearing and selfish, but at this point, there were no words left. Understood. The real mother is on her way.
What? What are you talking about? Just come back and take care of things.
I hung up without responding. On the way home, Brianna and I continued talking. Do you plan to keep living like this? If you decide to divorce, I'll fully support you. It's my specialty. Leave it to me. I've thought about divorce a few times, but at this age, and being isolated for so long, I lacked the courage. But with you around, I feel stronger. I'm not thinking about divorce right now, but if it comes to that, will you help me?
Of course. But for now, let me give him a piece of my mind.
Talking like that, we arrived home. Lawrence, expecting only me, looked a bit surprised when Brianna appeared behind me. "Oh, when you said the real mother, you meant Brianna. After abandoning your kid, what do you want now?" Lawrence spoke arrogantly towards Brianna.
"You really need to fix your attitude and personality. Let me tell you something."
"Huh?" With a face full of anger, Brianna criticized Lawrence.
"Why are you trying to ruin Kristen and Alana's relationship? You're destroying what Kristen has built. Do you enjoy controlling Alana? Do you think she'll respect you for this? What blood ties? You're far more unfit as a father."
It wasn't just one or two words, it was much more.
"But
Lawrence tried to make excuses, but Brianna didn't give him the chance.
"And you may not realize it, but you manipulated Alana to gain custody, didn't you? And now you're forcibly restricting Kristen's life. That's called confinement. But you know, I can always demand compensation through divorce court for everything you've done so far. I'm really sorry. Please forgive me. Just spare me from compensation through divorce court. I've wronged Brianna, Kristen, and Alana. I'm truly sorry. I'm begging you."
Lawrence, overwhelmed by Brianna's words, uncharacteristically admitted his faults and apologized sincerely. As I listened to Brianna's words and watched Lawrence apologize sincerely, I could only nod in agreement. Lawrence, in his repentant state, seemed somewhat smaller. "Brianna, thank you for this. I feel a bit relieved." I thanked Brianna, exchanged contact information, and we parted ways. The next day, I went to visit Alana alone.
"Alana, congratulations on the baby. Can I come in?"
"Mom, you came." "Yes, come in. Look at this." On the screen of the smartphone Alana showed me. "I'm sorry for everything. Please forgive me," it said. It seemed that Lawrence had genuinely reflected on the events of the previous day and had also apologized to Alana. I briefly explained the events of the previous day, being careful not to touch her postnatal body. "So that's why he apologized. Dad had always told me not to talk to Mom or get close to her, and if I didn't listen to him, he'd get really mad at me in secret. I wanted to talk to you more like before, but I was too scared to go against him. I'm sorry for treating you badly all this time. I'm sorry too for not noticing and helping you. I thought you hated me." Alana and I held hands, tears welling up as we talked, bridging the emotional distance that had grown between us. "I really wanted you to be there when the baby was born, but I couldn't tell Dad, and I felt so lonely. But thank you for coming." With that, Alana handed me the baby. So small, yet so warm and with a certain weight to it. I felt the love and warmth as I cried. After Alana is discharged, I plan to stay with her family for a while to help with postnatal care. During that time, I will carefully reconsider my relationship with Lawrence. I can't easily forgive Lawrence for what he has done to me, Brianna, and Alana, and I still feel anger. However, I also want to accept the weak part of Lawrence that tries to control others because he lacks confidence in himself. When I told Brianna this, "I'm always ready to file a lawsuit, you know," she said enthusiastically. I couldn't help but laugh at her determination. Then, sometime later, at Alana's request, I arranged a meeting for Brianna and Alana to reunite. "Alana, I'm sorry for making you feel lonely. I can't ask for forgiveness, but please know that you are important to me."
"Mom, back then, I really did like you."
The reunion after all those years was a bit awkward, but there was a nostalgic air about it. That night, Alana whispered softly, I'm lucky to have two moms who care about me. Alana and I have a relationship as genuine as any biological parent and child. Even without a blood connection, I never imagined we could build such a happy family. Living with Alana and my grandchild now, I feel very happy.
Hey Barbara, can't you reconsider? Daniel is still in middle school. To leave him and move abroad.
Barbara, the wife of her son, tilted her head slightly and frowned as if troubled.
Daniel is plain and slow, and to be honest, it feels like he's not even our child. He seems to get along with you in an odd way, so please take good care of him.
It's one thing to speak ill of oneself, but to say such words about her own son, Daniel, it made her tremble with anger. However, those feelings were suppressed, never turning into words, remaining in her heart. Daniel and I watched the car carrying the departing son and his family until it was out of sight, then looked up at the orange tree in the empty garden. As I wondered, Daniel pointed out that there were still a few left. My son Charles and his family had taken many oranges for memories, but a few remained on the branches. From a distance, it was hard to see clearly, but some of the fruit seemed to be slightly damaged.
Does that mean they didn't want those oranges?
As it got colder with a slight breeze, I suggested to Daniel that we go inside, but he shook his head slightly and turned to me, his face overflowing with tears.
Dad and Mom don't want me because I'm slow. It's okay. You don't need to worry.
I was furious. I closed my eyes, pondering what to do with this anger, and then pondered some more, firmly resolving to affirm and raise this child positively. My name is Susan. Lately, I've lost my appetite and have been feeling unwell. When I consulted a doctor about my unclear health issues, I was advised to get more nutrition. Even with the vague advice to get more nutrition, I wondered what exactly I should eat, considering going to a steakhouse every day. But that would never be sustainable with any amount of living expenses, so I decided to make balanced meals every day. No, that would be too much hassle to keep up. So, I decided to make it a point to eat the oranges planted in my garden. Honestly, I never really cared for the oranges planted in the yard before. I hadn't paid much attention to them every year. Usually, I left the fruit for the birds to eat or just cleaned up whatever fell to the ground, but this year, after seeing a TV infomercial about easy-to-use pruning shears, I was full of motivation and bought them. Just when I was determined to start picking the oranges, I ended up hurting my back. It was supposed to be easy according to the sales pitch, but apparently not for someone with a bad back. If there's a house in a quiet residential area known for its large orange tree, that would be ours. Our orange tree has years when it bears lots of fruit and years when it doesn't, and this year, the branches are laden with oranges. It's just the year I was determined to eat a lot of them. But what to do with my injured back? Just when I was thinking that, my son and his family came to visit at the perfect time. When I explained the situation to my son, he immediately said, "All right, I'll pick them." And he rushed out to the garden. My son and my grandson, Christopher, were using a long-handled pruning shear to joyfully pick oranges from the branches.
Wow, Christopher! You got a big one!
My son skillfully cut the oranges from the branches and had his son pick them up. As for me, I was sitting by the window overlooking the orange tree, staring at a chessboard with my other grandson, Daniel. Daniel was looking intently at the chess pieces laid out on the board, lost in thought, seemingly oblivious to the noise of Charles and Christopher gathering oranges in the garden. It seems I was so focused that I didn't even hear Charles and Christopher making noise while gathering oranges in the garden. When Christopher, the older brother, quietly placed an orange beside Daniel and then turned to me, he put his index finger to his lips in a gesture for silence. He didn't want to disturb his brother, who was deeply engrossed in the game. That was the kind of kindness Christopher had.
Charles, lunch is ready.
Yeah, thanks. We'll be right there. Perhaps one reason my son and his wife visit my house several times a month is because my husband had passed away early. My son's wife, Barbara, is a down-to-earth woman who naturally takes over the kitchen in our house to prepare lunches for everyone. Daniel and I were invited to join them for the meal, but Daniel remained silent, staring at the chessboard, unwilling to move. When I gently touched Daniel's shoulder,
Huh?
he looked up in surprise, saying,
Grandma, will you play chess with me after lunch?
Of course. Let's go. Barbara, Charles, and Christopher were enjoying their meal while watching TV, laughing together. The TV featured a special on a high school soccer player belonging to a famous high school, and Charles pointed at the TV, tapping Christopher on the shoulder. Hey, look, Christopher. The high school you're going to is on TV. Christopher has always been athletically gifted, shining in every game he plays. Daniel took up soccer as well, but wasn't quite as skilled. He couldn't outshine his brother. Barbara looked at Christopher with joy and said,
I heard from a friend that Christopher is quite famous among middle schoolers. He's really good at soccer. It seems his name has even spread to other schools.
She looked even happier than Christopher, the subject of the conversation. I couldn't help but clear my throat and glance at Daniel's expression. He looked somewhat lonely, slowly slurping up his pasta one strand at a time.
Now that Christopher has a scholarship for soccer in high school, it's Daniel's turn. With a promising brother like Christopher, Daniel will surely improve quickly too.
Right. Christopher and Daniel, let's play soccer in the park after lunch. But Charles, isn't Daniel going to continue with chess? Oh, right. You haven't finished yet? I informed Charles that the game was still ongoing. Then, I suggested if they'd like to join us in chess, though playing soccer is also great. Charles and Barbara exchanged glances and started laughing together. You're joking, right? Playing chess by the window on such a sunny day? What an unhealthy hobby. Charles, that's a bit harsh on Susan's only hobby. Both of them seemed to mock me and Daniel, but I didn't want to argue and risk spoiling our family relationship, so I nodded along and started washing up in the kitchen. I peeled the freshly picked oranges, placed them on a plate, and brought them out. Christopher and Daniel started eating them, laughing together. I discreetly approached Charles and tapped him lightly on the head from behind. Hey, you know Daniel isn't much into sports like soccer, right? He enjoys playing chess, so don't say weird things. Did I say something wrong? Charles, seeming neither concerned nor remorseful, took the ball and went to the nearby park with Christopher and Barbara. Left behind, Daniel and I returned to our seats by the window. Sitting in front of the sunlit chessboard, Daniel casually looked up at the orange tree.
There are still a lot of oranges left, huh?
Yes, do you want some more? Daniel shook his head slightly and then turned his gaze back to the chessboard, refocusing his attention. He has a strong ability to concentrate. At this point, I can't predict how Daniel will grow up, but I have a feeling he'll take a path quite different from his brother Christopher's. And so years passed since then. On a sunny day, Daniel and I were again eating oranges picked from the garden. After Charles finished bringing in few small boxes to my house, he stood by the window with a gentle smile, looking up at the orange tree. Sorry, Mom, please take good care of Daniel. I pondered over how to respond. While caressing the oranges picked from the garden, I sighed. Christopher, having been recognized for his soccer talent at his new high school, was scouted by an overseas club team. I, knowing little about soccer, couldn't grasp the significance of the team that scouted my grandson. But when I heard Charles was ready to quit his job and move abroad, I realized this was a big deal. With assistance promised by the scouting team for their life abroad, Barbara was already excited about the overseas move. Every time we met, she would say,
"I'm really interested in foreign cultures."
She was already studying the culture of the country through books. I had assumed the whole family would move abroad, but they asked me to raise Daniel alone in my house. Christopher was initially surprised and was opposed to the idea.
Think about it, Christopher. Wouldn't Daniel be happier living here with Grandma than in an unfamiliar environment? Don't you think so?
But Barbara convinced him by saying so. And today, after moving all of Daniel's belongings into my house, they were set to leave on an afternoon flight. Daniel looked sad as he checked the contents of a cardboard box filled with his clothes. Charles and Christopher, knowing they wouldn't return to this house for a while, picked many oranges from the garden tree as a final memory. As the tree's branches became bare with each orange picked, it started to look naked.
"Daniel, Grandma might not feel well sometimes, so help her out, okay? And work hard on your studies too."
Charles said this to Daniel as he cheerfully bid farewell. Though I knew it was already decided, I couldn't help but pull Barbara aside to a spot away from Christopher and Daniel and started speaking in a low voice.
"Hey Barbara, can't you reconsider? Daniel is still attending middle school. To leave him and move abroad."
Barbara tilted her head slightly and frowned as if troubled.
"Daniel is plain and slow, and to be honest, it feels like he's not even our child. Since he seems to get along with you in a strange way, please take good care of him."
It's one thing to speak ill of oneself, but to say such words about your own son, Daniel, made me tremble with anger. However, those feelings remained pressed deep into my heart, never turning into words. Daniel and I watched the car carrying my departing son and his family until it disappeared from view, then turned to look up at the orange tree in the empty garden. As I wondered about the tree, Daniel spoke and pointed out, "There are a few left." Charles and the others had taken many oranges as memories, but a few remained on the branches. From a distance, it was unclear, but some appeared slightly damaged. Does that mean they didn't want those oranges? As the breeze grew colder, I suggested to Daniel that we go inside. He shook his head slightly and turned to me, his face overflowing with tears. "Dad and Mom don't want me because I'm slow."
"It's okay. There's nothing to worry about."
I was furious. I closed my eyes, pondering what to do with this anger, then resolved to affirm and nurture this child positively. 9 years have passed since then. Beside the chessboard by the window, I looked up at the orange tree in the garden. The birds know best when the oranges are ripe, pecking at the fruit when it's time. I used this as a cue to start harvesting. Stepping out from the window to the garden, I picked a low-hanging fruit. It was free of insect damage and had a nice color. After the doorbell rang, I called out loudly,
"It's open!"
To my surprise, I was greeted by an unexpected visitor as heavy footsteps approached.
"Mom, it's been a while.
Where's Daniel?"
It's really been a long time. What brings you here all of a sudden?" "Well, I saw Daniel's achievements in the newspaper. Isn't it amazing? Finally, he feels like our son."
As I sighed heavily and sat back down in front of the chessboard, Barbara asked,
"Where's Daniel?" "He's reading a chess magazine in his room. He's a pro now, so try not to disturb him."
Since our parting 9 years ago, Daniel and I played chess daily, and he gradually showed his talent, eventually becoming a professional chess player. The journey was tough, but we persevered together. Though he never said it, Daniel might have wanted to prove something to the parents who left him. Recently, Daniel won a major title as a pro chess player, making headlines. I hadn't told Charles or Barbara, but they must have found out and hurried back. Soon, Daniel came out of his room. He had grown taller and more robust over the 9 years, the perfect picture of health. Charles, seeing his son all grown up, said, "It's been a while." Saying this, he put his arm around Daniel's shoulder, and from behind, Barbara also
"You've become so admirable,"
smiled tenderly, as if completely contented. "Now I'm willing to live with you."
"Now that you're a respectable adult, it's your turn to help out your dad and mom with their lives."
"I'm apparently not your child, so I have no obligation to help." The conversation sounded almost like a comedy, making me burst out laughing. Charles, tapping Daniel on the shoulder, looked puzzled. It seemed like the words were completely unexpected. The audacity to offer to live together after 9 years was astonishing. "What's wrong? Are you being stubborn after this long reunion? You must have been lonely living with Grandma all this time." "Don't worry, we'll live together from now on." "What are you talking about? Live together? I'm not a child anymore, why should I live with you?" Barbara, pulling Charles away from the frozen embrace, said,
"What are you saying? We haven't been able to contact Christopher for years, and our life is in shambles. We've been living off Christopher's soccer income, and now we have no savings."
"What does that have to do with me?"
"After all the effort we put into supporting Christopher's soccer, he suddenly disappeared. We didn't know what to do. It's impossible for us to start working now, and you're the only one we can rely on."
"If you're looking for Christopher, he's here in this house." "Hey, Christopher." At Daniel's casual call, Christopher appeared from the kitchen, wearing a cute cat apron, holding an orange, and skillfully peeling it with a knife.
"What's up?"
Christopher, with an innocent expression, surprised Charles and Barbara by being there.
"Christopher, why are you here?"
"Seems like there's a lot we need to talk about, so just sit down and wait. I'll cut some oranges for us." As Christopher served the oranges on a plate to Charles and Barbara, I prepared coffee for everyone. Christopher began to share that, although he was initially enthusiastic about his soccer career and contract with an overseas club, his experiences abroad gradually sparked an interest in becoming an interpreter. Upon hearing Christopher's dream, Charles,
"Being an interpreter won't earn you as much as a professional soccer player. That's not acceptable,"
dismissed it without even listening. Disappointed by his parents, who seemed only to care about the money he could bring in rather than his dreams, Christopher lost interest in soccer. He secretly contacted Daniel and me and returned to our town. Now, he's working at a language school while studying to become an interpreter. After explaining this, Christopher sat up straight and faced Charles and Barbara directly. "I'm truly grateful that you took me abroad for soccer. But I've found a dream I want to pursue more than soccer. If you're going to deny that, I'd rather you not be involved in my life."
"Not be involved? Do you know how much we sacrificed to support your soccer career abroad?"
He reflected on how much time he had sacrificed as a father to support Christopher's soccer. He passionately explained how much he and Barbara, Christopher's mother, had hoped and expected to make Christopher a top soccer player.
"Christopher, your dad quit his job to support your soccer. And now, you're giving that up for a job as an interpreter? It's not too late to go back to the club team."
"Right, that's a good idea. If life gets tough until you succeed in soccer, Daniel can support us. He's a famous chess player now, after all." The conversation seemed somewhat detached from reality. Perhaps even Charles and Barbara realized the absurdity of their words. Despite understanding the unfairness of their situation, fear of not being able to survive without such plans seemed to drive their irrational statements. The reason no one spoke up wasn't because the discussion had concluded, but rather because the end point of the conversation had become unclear. I poured coffee into each of the empty cups. The scent of coffee filled the living room, which was enveloped in silence. Daniel quietly shifted his gaze to the chessboard by the window. After Dad and Mom left for abroad, I played chess almost every day. Left for abroad? That makes us sound like the bad guys. Do you think you would have been happy if you had come with us?
You're right. If I had lived with parents like you, I might have lost sight of what I was striving for, just like Christopher did.
This provocative stance immediately angered Barbara. She stood up and lunged at Daniel, prompting me to quickly step in front of him to block her. Barbara glared at me and shouted at Daniel.
Move! How dare you speak to your parents like that? Speak to your parents? It's been 9 years. 9 years! You didn't come back to see Daniel even once in all that time. Can you imagine how long these years have been for him? We are their parents, you know? Can you believe that children wouldn't help their parents? Christopher and Daniel are saying they're abandoning us when we're in trouble.
Charles, not wanting to be outdone by Barbara's intensity, stood up to face me as well.
Exactly. It's irresponsible not to help when your parents are in trouble. It's a child's duty. You're talking about duty? I mentioned I was feeling a bit unwell 9 years ago, remember? Yet, you chose to ignore that and went abroad. It's shameful to change your tune when it suits you. But that's because...
Charles mumbled awkwardly, his gaze darting around, not sure what to do. Christopher approached Daniel with a calm voice and apologized. I'm really sorry for everything. Dad, we've decided we want to cut ties with you and Mom. Can you just leave us alone from now on?
Don't joke around. What do you take your parents for? Use us when convenient and discard us when done? You're going to abandon us irresponsibly while we're struggling with our lives?
Involuntarily, I found myself shouting.
That's not it.
My voice might have echoed throughout the quiet neighborhood, possibly heard by the neighbors. But I couldn't worry about the neighbors at such a moment. I grasped Christopher and Daniel's hands firmly in mine. Holding them by my sides, I could feel them trembling slightly. Despite their calm demeanor, they were frightened by their biological parents' sudden visit. I knew I had to express the anger on their behalf. It was time to voice the feelings Christopher and Daniel had harbored towards their parents.
It's the adults' job to work for their children, not the other way around. We're the parents. We are a family. After abandoning a young Daniel and selfishly deciding on Christopher's potential, like you have any rights to say that. How are you their family?
At my words, Charles's eyes widened in shock, and he reached out to grab my collar. Instinctively, I braced for any potential violence by curling up defensively. However, Daniel quickly stepped in front of me and effortlessly lifted Charles, sending him spinning through the air. And before you know it, Charles was lying on the ground, looking up at Daniel. In a state of shock and lying down, Charles is too astonished to say anything. He probably never imagined that the once frail Daniel could throw him.
I won't allow anyone to harm our family.
Being completely thrown can make a person feel utterly defeated. Charles, lying on the ground and looked down upon by Daniel, must have felt a deep sense of embarrassment. Barbara rushed to Charles with a worried look, but he got up, saying, "I'm fine." However, the aggression he had shown earlier had vanished. Voices from outside could be heard. It seemed the neighbors had gathered, alerted by the shouting from our house. Charles and Barbara exchanged glances and hurriedly left the house, their departure marked by their pitiful retreat. Their future, after such a humiliating exit, remained unknown. Relying on Christopher's income from soccer, Charles and Barbara had little in the way of qualifications or work experience. making it difficult for them to find decent employment at their age. 2 years later, Christopher successfully became an interpreter. His work took him to various places, keeping him busy. Daniel continued to diligently study and practice chess, striving to master the game. Both brothers excelled in their respective fields. As for me, with my grandchildren grown and independent, I started teaching at a children's chess club, aiming to nurture their interests. Having loved chess since childhood, I had once dreamed of becoming a professional player. Despite joining chess clubs in middle and high school and competing in numerous matches, I recognized my limitations and eventually lost faith in my own talent. Even though friends and family encouraged me, saying I had talent and should keep at it, I lost the ability to believe in myself. Having experienced the pain of not accepting my own immaturity, regretting giving up on my dreams, and feeling a tightness in my chest, I had a strong desire to convey something important to the children in my chess class. After all, I had successfully raised Daniel, an exceptional professional player. Although it's often challenging, I find fulfillment in guiding each child, focusing on their individual hearts and potential. Christopher and Daniel live harmoniously with me, sharing these values. I deeply respect Christopher and Daniel, each thriving and fulfilling their dreams. One day, after a long while, Christopher and Daniel offered to pick oranges in our garden. As I've gotten older, reaching for the high oranges has become more of a chore, so I was grateful for the help. Christopher stretched the pruning shears as high as he could, trying to gather all the oranges for my chess club students.
This is quite the tedious task,
I remarked with a smile, solving chess problems by the window. I remembered how I used to challenge Daniel with my own chess problems, but now, as a professional player, he would present me with puzzles and watch amused as I pondered over them.
This one's tough.
It's a joyful realization that Daniel, whom I taught chess, has far surpassed me in skill. Hearing laughter, I saw Christopher and Daniel gathering oranges with joy. Grandma?
What's up?
There's something I've always wondered about every year. Daniel pointed to an orange located at the very top of the tree. That branch is always out of reach with the pruning shears, so picking from it is forbidden. Shouldn't we pick all of them for your chess students? I stopped Christopher from fetching a ladder from the shed.
Leaving a few oranges on the tree keeps it from looking completely bare.
I chuckled.
Leave that one. It's meant to be left there. I used to look at the remaining oranges after Dad and Mom left us and wonder if I was like those unwanted fruits.
Daniel's face showed a hint of sadness. I remained silent, focusing on the chess problem.
Not just for oranges, but there's an old custom of leaving one fruit on the tree instead of picking them all.
Daniel came over to me and watched as I pondered over a chess problem he had created. His expression bore the same youthful look as it did back then.
There's an old custom of leaving one fruit on the tree as a token of gratitude and hope for future harvests.
Gratitude and hope.
Moreover, it's left as food for the birds to help them through the harsh winter. The last remaining orange isn't unwanted. It's actually the most special one.
Special.
I see, so that's how it was.
Daniel whispered softly, and I gently stroked his head. Daniel, who has grown quite a bit, doesn't try to escape from my hands and allows me to continue stroking him without resistance. Well, what to do now? This chess problem presented by such a dear grandchild. It's too difficult for me to understand at all. Maintaining my dignity as a respected chess figure in his eyes was crucial, yet finding the solution seemed impossible in the moment. As I pondered, stroking Daniel's head, I hoped for a way out of this predicament, wishing for more such special moments to continue indefinitely.
I really need to talk to Lynn about something.
Emily, my daughter-in-law, seems to hesitate for a moment, taking a deep breath. But then, as if she's made up her mind, she starts to speak with determination. I'm sorry, but I just can't do it anymore. I can't afford to pay $3,000 every month for Brian's care. It's just too much for me. She said this through tears. I couldn't understand what Emily was talking about.
Paying $3,000 a month for care? What are you talking about? Brian passed away 8 years ago. You should know that. What? But Ridley said we needed money for the care. I wasn't told he passed away. I don't understand what's happening.
Emily seemed genuinely unaware. Even I am struggling to grasp the situation, but it's an undeniable fact that my husband Brian has passed away.
I really wasn't told about his passing. It's the truth.
Emily was desperately trying to make her case. Based on Emily's behavior up until now, I was convinced she wasn't lying, and I knew she wasn't the type to make up such a story.
About 6 months ago, Ridley came to me saying we needed money for Brian's care. He said our parents had sent us a lot of money during our student days, and now it was his turn to send money.
Hearing Emily's frail voice, I felt a rage like never before. I could easily imagine how troubled Emily had been. I was convinced that my son Ridley was lying. Given the circumstances, there was no doubt about it. I could forgive a lot, but not telling his wife about Brian's death and asking her for money was unforgivable. I had to make Ridley reflect on his actions. Otherwise, I wouldn't know what to say to Brian in heaven. I made up my mind and approached Emily with a proposal.
Listen, we're going to gather evidence of Ridley's wrongdoing together. We'll make sure he can't make any excuses. Then, we'll confront him with it.
My name is Lynn. After graduating from nursing school, I started working at a state public hospital. The job was tough, but it's where I had a fateful encounter with Brian. He initially came to my hospital as a patient, and I was assigned to be his nurse. During his care, he shared many stories with me. I was somewhat intrigued by him, so I often engaged in our conversations. The conversations we shared during those tough days at work became my greatest joy. And then, when he was about to be discharged, he gave me his contact information. Let's get in touch if you'd like. I didn't hesitate to contact him immediately. And so, we started dating officially. I later learned that he had fallen for me at first sight, and was desperately trying to get my attention by striking up conversations. I came to deeply love him for that. Our relationship continued without any major fights because he was such a kind person. And eventually, we got married. Even after marriage, my relationship with Brian was just fine. And a few years later, our son Ridley was born. From that time, Brian became busy with work and was rarely at home. But when the family was together, we would happily go out to eat or travel. Several more years passed, and Ridley went on to college. His college was quite far from home, reachable only by airplane. I felt a sense of vulnerability sending my son so far away, but convinced myself it was for his future. Ridley would come home during long holidays, and he seemed even brighter than before, which reassured me. However, being a STEM college, the expenses seemed to be quite high. Ridley often asked me to send him money. Mom, I'm sorry, but I'm short on money this month. Can you send me some?
Didn't I just send you some recently? What are you spending all this money on?
It's for school stuff. The books they require us to buy are all specialized and really expensive. Plus, the equipment and materials for research cost quite a bit too. Ridley pleaded desperately. And there's also living expenses. It's really tough, even with the part-time job. I can't keep up. Ridley said, sounding almost on the verge of tears. Hearing his voice made my heart ache. I wondered how anxious Ridley must be, living so far from home. Our own financial situation wasn't easy, but I felt compelled to help no matter what.
Okay, I understand. I'll send it by the end of this week, so don't worry. Thank you, Mom.
Ridley's voice brightened up upon hearing my response, filling me with an indescribable joy. This exchange continued until Ridley graduated from college. After graduation, Ridley successfully found a job in a company in the city. I wished he could come back to his hometown, but it couldn't be helped. The university was a plane ride away, but now he was just a long train ride away. It was somewhat closer, so I had to be content with that. However, Ridley became busier with work and visited home even less. Ridley, when will you come home next? Let me know when you decided. Sorry, Mom. Work's been so hectic. I don't see myself coming home anytime soon. It's like I hardly have any days off, and sometimes my boss calls me in unexpectedly. So, I really can't afford to come home. It sounds tough. It's good to work hard, but don't overdo it. If you break down, it's all for nothing. Make sure to reach out if things get too hard.
Yeah, I got it. Thanks.
Ridley said this and quickly hung up the phone. His somewhat indifferent attitude pained me. But I told myself it couldn't be helped. Ridley was a grown adult, after all. It was probably overbearing for me to say too much now. I tried to suppress my loneliness and convinced myself of this. I also made a point not to call Ridley. I didn't want to interrupt his work. For a while, we didn't communicate. But then, one day, Ridley called me out of the blue.
Lynn, it's been a while. Is now a good time? It's fine. What's going on? Well, I've decided to get married. What? What do you mean? I happened to meet someone and we got along well. So, we decided to get married. I've already met her parents. We'll be coming home soon to introduce her to you. I see. I'll be looking forward to it.
I said this and hung up the phone. Ridley was getting married. And just the thought made my heart flutter. I wondered what kind of woman she could be. Would I be able to see my grandchildren? All sorts of thoughts raced through my mind. I was so happy that I marked the calendar with a big sign. And then the day finally came. Ridley's girlfriend, named Emily, was a quiet, beautiful, and kind-hearted woman with a sharp mind. I liked her immediately. She seemed perfect for Ridley. There was no reason to oppose their marriage, and things moved quickly. Ridley and Emily were soon happily married. After the wedding, Emily would help me with my work whenever Ridley was home. It seemed that Emily thought highly of me too, and there was no sign of any mother-in-law and daughter-in-law conflict. However, as time passed, Ridley became busier and had almost no time to come home. Even though we would occasionally talk on the phone, those calls became rare. I was lonely, but I guessed young people preferred spending time with each other. Out of consideration for Ridley and his wife, I decided not to call unless it was an emergency. After that, we hardly communicated. There was no interaction after they called to wish me a happy birthday, and time passed by. But a year later, Emily suddenly called. Lynn, it's been a while. Emily spoke in a heavy, somber tone. I was concerned by her demeanor, but chose not to press the issue. Oh, Emily, it's been a while. How's Ridley doing? Yes, he's fine. But there's something I just have to tell you. Something you have to say? What happened? Emily seemed to hesitate for a moment, taking a deep breath. But then, as if she had made up her mind, she began to speak earnestly. I'm sorry, but I just can't do it anymore. I can't afford to pay $3,000 every month for Brian's care. It's just too much for me." Emily said this through tears. I couldn't grasp what Emily was saying.
$3,000 a month for care? What are you talking about? Please don't joke about this. But how can there be care expenses? Brian passed away 8 years ago. You should know that, shouldn't you? What? But Ridley told me we needed money for care. I haven't heard anything about him passing away. What's going on here? I'm completely lost.
Emily seemed genuinely unaware. I was having trouble understanding the situation myself. But there's no denying the fact that Brian has passed away.
Listen, Emily, Brian passed away 8 years ago due to his illness worsening. He was indeed in need of care before that.
I said this carefully, trying not to upset Emily.
I did tell Ridley about how tough Brian's care was. But I never asked for money. I can't believe it. I wasn't told anything about his passing. It's true.
Emily pleaded desperately. I was convinced she wasn't lying, based on her behavior up to now. I knew she wasn't the type to say such things. I recalled the time when Brian passed away and explained it to Emily in as much detail as possible. When Brian was critically ill, and it was clear he was in danger, I contacted Ridley. He came home then. Emily gasped over the phone. She might not have known even that. But you didn't come. I heard you were busy with an overseas business trip and couldn't possibly come back here, I said, feeling a pang in my heart. But at that time, I was so preoccupied with Brian that I didn't have the capacity to consider Emily's situation.
Overseas business trip? I'm an office worker. I don't go on trips abroad. In fact, I've never been on a business trip.
Emily exclaimed, seemingly shocked.
Why would Ridley say such a thing? Where did all the care money I've been paying go?
Emily was clearly shaken over the phone. But after a while, she began to explain the situation slowly. This started about 6 months ago. Ridley came to me saying we needed money for Brian's care. He mentioned how our parents sent us money during our student days, and now it was his turn to send money. Hearing Emily's frail voice, I felt an unprecedented wave of anger. So, I initially paid willingly. But the amount kept increasing, and now it's $3,000 a month. Emily sighed deeply after saying that. And I could easily imagine how much she had been struggling. I've been dipping into my savings to make the payments, but honestly, I've reached my limit. That's why I called. Hearing Emily's words, I was convinced that Ridley was lying. The situation made it clear. Forgiving minor things is one thing, but not telling his wife about Brian's death and asking for money is unforgivable. If this demand escalates, it could even lead to a criminal case. I must make Ridley reflect on his actions. Otherwise, I wouldn't know what to say to Brian in heaven. I resolved to do something and approached Emily with a suggestion.
Emily, I believe you. It's clear Ridley is lying.
Is that so? I was foolish. If only I had spoken to you sooner, this wouldn't have happened.
No, it's not your fault. But we can't let this go. Listen, let's gather evidence of Ridley's wrongdoing together. We'll collect enough so he can't make any excuses, and then we'll confront him with it.
Understood. What should I do?
Well, Emily, I'd like you to gather any evidence you can find at home. Do you have a study or something? There should be receipts and documents there. I'll hire a detective agency to investigate Ridley's background. There's probably more to this.
Got it. I'll carefully collect evidence without being noticed and look through messages to see if there's any information about Ridley. I'll contact you if I find anything. Emily said this and then hung up the phone. At first, she was unsettled, but now there wasn't a trace of that to be seen. With that attitude, he's bound to thoroughly search for evidence. I started looking online for a detective agency and immediately requested an investigation into Ridley's background. Several weeks later, I visited Ridley's house. I had asked Emily about Ridley's day off in advance. Guided by Emily, I headed towards the living room. Unaware of anything, Ridley was relaxing in the living room. He was surprised to see me enter.
What? Mom, what brings you here all of a sudden? You could have let me know you were coming.
Sorry for not telling you in advance. I just needed to talk to you about something.
I see. But I have to step out for a bit. Emily will fill you in on the details.
It seemed Ridley sensed something was off. He suddenly got up in a hurry, looking to leave the scene.
Sit down,
I yelled at Ridley. He looked surprised and flustered. Emily, with a blank expression, went over to Ridley and made him sit on the sofa. Ridley looked back and forth between me and Emily, his face clearly showing his distress.
You know, Ridley, I got a call from Emily the other day. She told me you've been making her pay $3,000 a month for Brian's care expenses.
Upon hearing this, Ridley's expression twisted, and he bit his lip, realizing his actions had been discovered.
But that's strange, isn't it? Because Brian is no longer with us. So, who exactly are these care expenses for? I'd like to hear it from you.
Ridley didn't answer right away. He looked down and scratched his head.
Not going to answer? Then let's change the question. Emily didn't know that Brian had passed away.
Emily looked down at Ridley with cold eyes.
You said she couldn't come because she was on a business trip abroad, right? But Emily has never been on a business trip, let alone abroad. What do you have to say about that?
Ridley remained silent, still looking down.
Say something,
I shouted even louder than before. I was furious at Ridley for choosing to remain silent at such a time. Emily's lips were pressed tightly together as she glared at Ridley. Ridley sighed deeply and rubbed his face with his hands. Listen, we already know you've been lying. We've gathered plenty of evidence to prove it. So, staying silent now is pointless. I said this in a more admonishing tone. Scolding him wouldn't make him reflect. I wanted him to understand why what he did was wrong. Now, about the $3,000 you conned out of Emily. What did you use it for? Tell me the truth. Ridley was silent for a while, but eventually, he began to speak weakly. I wanted to use that money to start a business. My current job is so tough. I thought starting my own business would increase my income and allow me to work more freely. Ridley murmured, clearly shaken. I wanted to immediately rebut, but I decided to let him finish speaking first. I know I did something wrong to you guys. But I thought you'd be against it if I told you the truth, so I couldn't bring myself to say it. I'm really sorry. After saying this, Ridley got up from the sofa and apologized. Well, I appreciate your honesty. Look at me, I said gently. Ridley, seemingly relieved, looked up, but he was met with documents and photos I dropped in front of him. They were the detective's report and documents Emily had found at home. Upon seeing them, Ridley's face turned pale.
It seems you've been borrowing money from various places since your college days. And despite that, you've been splurging on girls at bars. You've been living quite lavishly, haven't you? And that's not all. You even took out loans in my name.
Emily said this and shoved the documents in Ridley's face.
I had no idea about any of this. You're dissatisfied with just $3,000 a month? Am I just someone convenient for you to get money from? Say something.
Emily seemed to have reached her limit, grabbing Ridley by the collar in frustration. Enough, Ridley.
As I said earlier, we know all about your lies, and we have all the evidence we need.
I stopped Emily and explained again to Ridley, who, frightened by Emily's scolding, listened quietly.
We know how you've been spending your money and what your personal life is like. There's no use hiding anything now.
Ridley groaned softly, ruffling his hair. But I continued undeterred. We want to hear everything from you.
Understand?
So, start talking. This time, Ridley seemed genuinely remorseful. He began to speak through tears. I'm sorry, truly sorry. It was all a lie. Tears fell from Ridley's eyes, forming puddles on the floor.
Back in college, I asked for money not for textbooks, but because I wanted money to have fun. I didn't have a part-time job. I spent all the money on shopping and hanging out with friends.
Hearing Ridley finally tell the truth brought me some relief.
And what about after you started working?
After I started working, I went to bars after work.
I took a liking to one of the girls there and ended up spending a lot of money on her.
If I didn't, she wouldn't pay me any attention.
But you've been spending more than you earn, haven't you? How did you manage that? By the time I realized, I couldn't borrow money in my name anymore. But I still had to pay back my debts. So, I started borrowing money in Emily's name. I secretly took her ID and completed the procedures online.
Emily looked like she wanted to say something upon hearing this. But I gestured for her to wait. I had decided we would only interject after he had confessed everything. I had no other choice.
But when that wasn't an option anymore, I lied about needing money for care expenses to get it from Emily.
I'm really sorry. Ridley broke down in tears like a child after saying this. But the ones who truly deserved to cry were Emily and me. I exchanged a look with Emily and sighed deeply. Emily seemed to have lost the will to scold him any further at the sight of Ridley's pathetic state. After sobbing for a while, Ridley apologized again. I'm truly sorry.
I deeply regret my actions and promise I won't do it again.
I swear it right here. I'll definitely pay back the money. Please forgive me. Ridley apologized sincerely. But his words were hard to trust. He had been deceiving those close to him for so long. Even if we forgave him, it was almost certain he would just repeat his actions. Ridley, it's over. We can't trust anything you say.
We never intended to forgive you. And this isn't the end.
Be prepared. An hour later, the doorbell of the house rang. Emily went to answer it. Ridley watched her apprehensively. Led in by Emily, the newcomers were women. Upon seeing their faces, Ridley caught his breath. You recognize these women, Ridley?
They're your ex-girlfriends. Don't pretend you've forgotten. You've been living off these women, haven't you?
Emily glared at Ridley as she spoke coldly. Why? Why are all of you here?
We found out you were living off these women thanks to Lynn's investigation. So I reached out to them, saying I wanted to apologize from the bottom of my heart.
Upon seeing their faces, Ridley caught his breath. Despair appeared in Ridley's eyes. Then, word spread.
Thanks to that, your ex-girlfriends have come together, wanting to support me. Please, express all the feelings you've been holding inside.
Emily's words were the signal for the start. One by one, Ridley's ex-girlfriends began to reveal his misdeeds. Ridley's face turned red from the overwhelming revelations, enduring the embarrassment. I, too, felt a deep sense of shame listening to it all, wondering where I went wrong in raising my son, and how he ended up in this situation. The exposure made me wish I could disappear from the sheer embarrassment. After the revelations, Emily placed divorce papers on the table. Ridley, I can't live with you anymore. Please sign these divorce papers right now.
And write a promissory note to pay compensation and repay the loans you took out in my name.
No, please, Emily, let's be rational about this. This isn't right. I'll truly change, so please reconsider. I'd be lost without you right now. Ridley pleaded pitifully, but his ex-girlfriends unanimously scolded him to get real. Not a single person in the room was on Ridley's side. Reluctantly, Ridley signed the divorce papers and wrote a promissory note and affidavit complying with Emily's demands. Afterward, Ridley, now in tears, turned to me, begging for help. Mom, I'm really sorry. This is my last selfish request. Please help me with the repayments. I know I've done wrong by lying, but I can't do this alone. Please.
Lynn, you don't need to help him.
Just leave him be. I looked into Ridley's eyes, reminiscing about the warmth of holding him for the first time. The warmth of holding Ridley for the first time, the joyful days spent with Brian and the three of us, the sense of vulnerability when sending Ridley off to college. It all comes back to me as if it were just yesterday. Despite his faults, he was still my son. All right, Ridley. No matter what you've done, you're my irreplaceable son. Ridley's eyes lit up with joy at my words. I don't believe I'm entirely blameless. Perhaps I made you feel lonely without realizing it. I was overwhelmed with remorse towards Ridley.
So, I'll take responsibility too. I promise to take care of you until the end.
Thank you, Mom. Thank you so much. Ridley held my hands, apologizing through his tears. Just then, the doorbell rang again, and Emily went to answer it. Several well-dressed, stout men entered the living room.
Good afternoon. We are here following a request. Is this gentleman Ridley?
One of the men confirmed in a low voice.
Yes, that's him. We've finished our discussion, so please take him now.
Understood. The men briefly responded, then lifted Ridley by his arms and made him stand. Caught off guard, Ridley screamed and resisted, but he was no match for the men's strength.
Mom, who are these people? What do you mean they're taking me? Stop! Let me go! I do want to help you get back on your feet, but I'm getting older and that's becoming difficult. So, I consulted with the detective agency, and they recommended a good rehabilitation facility.
I paused there. My heart was aching as if it were being torn apart. Ridley looked at me with tears in his eyes. With determination, I met his gaze and declared,
"You're going there to be re-educated and fix your rotten self. This is my final act of sympathy for you. This can't be happening. Let me go. Please, Emily, anyone, help me."
Ridley desperately pleaded for help, but Emily and his ex-girlfriends remained unmoved, watching him with cold eyes. It's a safe place, not dangerous. You'll just have your daily life and work managed while living there. If you truly are sorry, you'll follow their guidance, won't you?
No, I don't want this. I swear, I really won't do anything bad again. Please help me.
Ridley struggled as he was taken away. That's when I finally shed tears. I didn't want to do this. But the issue was too significant. If not rehabilitated now, Ridley could bring misery not only upon himself but also upon many others. I'm so sorry, Ridley. I apologized from the bottom of my heart. Emily came over and comforted me. There were tears in her eyes as well. Sending Ridley to the facility resolved everything for the moment. The debts Ridley had accumulated on his own would now be his responsibility to repay. So far, he has been making regular monthly payments into Emily's account without issue, as the total amount was too large for a lump sum payment. It will undoubtedly take a long time before Ridley has repaid everything. This is all a matter of personal responsibility. I've been able to keep up with Ridley's situation through occasional updates from the facility staff. Initially, it seems Ridley attempted to escape whenever he saw an opportunity. However, the dedicated efforts of the facility's staff in educating him have led to him now leading a quiet life, following the daily routine. I can only hope that he truly reforms from the bottom of his heart. Emily has been living alone since then. Fortunately, her salary is sufficient, so she doesn't seem to be struggling financially. I deeply regret what happened and feel truly sorry for Emily. She might have faced significant life disruptions due to debts she had no part in. Just thinking about it makes me feel like I can never apologize enough to Emily. However, Emily doesn't seem to hold anything against me. In her view, Ridley is the one at fault, not me. Moreover, Emily still visits my home every few months, mainly for sightseeing purposes. The main focus, it seems, is on tourism. Every time they visit, they bring various gifts, share stories, and help with household chores. Even though our official in-law relationship has ended, our bond feels closer than ever. After Brian's passing and sending Ridley to the facility, Emily's visits have become a significant source of joy for me. Now, I look forward to her visits and live a peaceful life on my own.
Don't make cakes that taste bad. It looked suspicious, so I tasted it first. I felt it so unhealthy, though I threw the garbage out the window.
In an instant, I realized this situation was a complete disaster.
You threw away the cake? I'm still at work.
I am Karen. I'm 28 years old and work at a bank. I got married last year and am still in the honeymoon phase. My husband, Mark, is 30 and works as a pharmacist. We met on social media, of all places. I love music and often post about my favorite artists. Mark shared my passion for music. At first, we communicated through direct messages. I was hesitant to meet someone I knew only in social media.
But, strangely, I found myself wanting to meet Mark.
He lived about an hour's drive away. It's not far from my home. I figured a meal would be harmless, so I gathered the courage to meet him. Surprisingly, I felt completely at ease, as if we'd met before. Our conversation flowed without a break.
I found myself passionately talking about our favorite artists.
Perhaps because we'd been in touch every day, there was a strangely close feeling. After that, we went out for meals a few times. From good morning to good night, we were in constant contact. Before I knew it, I was eagerly awaiting his messages. And then we officially started dating. It was surprising, even to myself. My mom passed away from illness soon after I started working. We had a close relationship, like friends. Being from a single-parent family, I felt very lonely. That's when Mark came into my life.
To me, Mark was a savior.
He's also very dedicated to his work. When we're together, Mark seems most animated when talking about work. He listens attentively to my work-related issues and supports me.
That's what I love about Mark.
Mark's mother, Jane, has been incredibly kind since when we started dating. Knowing I don't have parents.
Karen, you can tell me anything. Whether it's troubles or complaints, anything is fine. I want to be close to you. Let's not be formal and just be ourselves.
She always looked out for me. Eating out is nice, but homemade meals are good once in a while, right? She would say like that, and invited me to enjoy her home cooking. When Mark proposed and we decided to get married, she cried tears of joy. Since I don't have parents, we decided not to have a wedding.
Jane, understanding and kind, was all right with that.
After we got married, Jane moved in with us. Mark's father passed away when he was young, and Jane raised him single-handedly. In today's world, where it's normal for women to work, but some people still oppose it.
One of a friend of mine struggled with this problem, so it was on my mind. I love my job and wanted to continue working even after getting married.
But I got married, it wasn't just about what I wanted. When I talked to Jane about this, "Isn't it wonderful to enjoy your work? Of course, I'll help you. I'll do the household chores, so don't worry. It makes me happy to have a job to do. I get restless if I'm not doing something. Leave the cleaning and doing laundry to me." She understood and supported my desire to work, making mother-in-law issues non-existent.
Going out with Jane on days when Mark at work is really fun.
Though everything seems perfect, there is someone I struggle with. Mark has an older brother, Tom, and his wife, Betty. Tom got married 6 years ago and has a 5-year-old daughter, Sally. When we first met after our marriage was decided,
"You seem like you're good at sucking up, getting along well with Jane."
Lucky for you. Her comment, which sounded like sarcasm, left me speechless at our first meeting. I tried to minimize contact with her, but it's not always easy. Betty often leaves Sally with Jane. "I'm going for a drink today, so please let her stay over. She's picky with food, so just give her some bread for now."
She would hand over a single Danish before leaving for her weekly outings. Even if she loves Danish, eating the same thing over and over isn't good.
Jane would say this with a wry smile. But Sally is a really picky eater, only eating sweets or Danish. Sally is smaller than other kids her age. I was a bit concerned but didn't think too deeply about it because she seemed healthy.
Jane adored Sally.
Although I had doubts about Betty's weekly outings, but it made Jane happy, so I let it be. Betty, a stay-at-home wife, dislikes working women. She wasn't pleased about me working. When Mark and I were getting married,
marriage only makes sense with someone who can perfectly manage household chores. Carefully choose someone who can handle quality ingredients to avoid getting sick.
Usually, working women are arrogant, so think it through. She was negative towards me. Betty is stubborn and set in her ways, rarely listening to others. Thanks to Jane's support, Mark and I were able to get married. Even after our marriage, Betty would insult me whenever she saw me.
A woman's worth is in childbearing, not just working. Start raising kids early. I doubt you're cut out for it. Working and parenting are totally different.
Career women always seem so self-centered. She constantly belittled me. Amidst this, we decided to celebrate Jane's 60th birthday. Since she's always been so kind, I wanted to do something special for her. Due to a pandemic, we planned to have it at home. As the host of the party, I was in charge of cooking. I knew Jane's favorite dishes and was excited planning the menu. The number of attendees was 6 in total, including my family and Tom's family. I planned to take the afternoon off to prepare for the day. But, due to a sudden issue at work, I had to work the whole day. Such last-minute changes were common in my job. So, I had to adjust my plans. I had planned to cook in the afternoon, but that was no longer possible. I quickly ordered the steaks and appetizers I had previously thought of. When I told Mark about this, "I'll probably finish work earlier, so I can pick them up. Don't worry. The steak will be a hit." I was relieved that we could start at the planned time. I was also planning a surprise,
which made me smile just thinking about it.
Just as I was about to finish work, I received a call.
It was from Betty. She rarely made a phone calls, so I wondered what was up. She sounded in a bad mood. Hey, Karen. Where are you for Jane's 60th birthday celebration? Get ready quickly. You said you were in charge of cooking, but I bet you haven't done anything. I only feed my child with organic products, so don't buy anything weird. Make sure the dishes are photogenic. And where's the key? I can't get in.
She was aggressive right from the start. With so many complaints, I didn't know what to respond to first.
But I wasn't late.
There was still over an hour until the meeting time, but she acted as if I was delaying things. Also as the food, but all expenses were on us. So she really wasn't in a position to complain.
Betty, aren't you come a bit early? There's no one at home right now. Mark will be home soon, so you can ask him then let you in.
Her voice sounded as irritated because she wanted to get into the house early. I think she just came early because she had nothing else to do.
Hurry up! Waiting in this heat is like telling to get heat stroke,
she said.
Please wait in your car to avoid the heat. It won't be much longer. Sorry.
After I said this.
Hurry up! I don't want to waste gas.
And she hung up abruptly. It seemed she was upset because Jane happened to be out and nobody was home. I contacted to Mark, and he said he was almost home, so I left her to him.
The thought of going back was daunting.
Because of worrying about Betty's behavior, I decided to call Mark before heading home to check on things. Then, I learned that Sally was happily playing in a plastic pool Jane had set up at home. Just as I was about to head back, relieved, but I received another call from Betty.
Apprehensively, I answered, only to hear, "Don't make cakes that taste bad." It looked suspicious, so I tasted it first. I felt it so unhealthy, though I threw the garbage out the window.
In an instant, I realized this situation was a complete disaster.
Did you throw away the cake? I'm still at work, and I didn't make that cake.
Turns out, she had thrown the cake out the window.
Hearing this fact, I panicked.
The cake was actually the highlight of the day, a surprise cake for Jane. Moreover, someone had painstakingly made it for her. Betty refused to believe that I hadn't made it.
Huh? I can't believe someone who cooks regularly would make a cake like that. I was shocked you were planning to serve it. Shame on you.
And she completely refused to believe it. I decided to rush home to assess the situation.
Then, I heard Sally crying over the phone. The worst possible turn of events.
Apparently, the cake had fallen where Tom and Sally were playing outside.
The cake was a surprise that Tom and Sally had made for Jane the day before.
Originally, I had planned to make the cake. While talking to Mark, I learned Sally was enjoying helping out in the kitchen. Thinking it would be special, I suggested to Tom that Sally could help make the cake, to which he agreed enthusiastically.
Unfortunately, Betty was out at the time and unaware of this.
It was a plan to make Jane feel extra special with a cake made by her beloved Sally. Sally's crying was getting louder on the phone. Unable to stay put, I hurried to go home. When I arrived, the atmosphere was tense. Tom was normally calm, but was raising his voice.
Regardless of who made it, it's not right to just throw it away. And who opens the fridge in someone else's house as they please? Don't you have any common sense?
To this, Betty responded.
I just didn't want Sally to eat something strange.
Food is important. Unlike you, I'm taking parenting seriously. Betty and Tom started a heated argument. Jane was desperately trying to comfort Sally. I suspected Betty threw away the cake I made for out of spite. After handing Sally to Tom, Jane angrily confronted the situation.
How can you do something like this? This is not what adults do. Even children understand that. And what's this about organic? Feeding her only Danish all the time is not healthy. She needs a varied diet. Sally is the one suffering. This was the first time I saw Jane was angry. I was shocked.
But she voiced everything I couldn't say. Despite Betty was unyielding. She's just picky.
What's wrong with letting her eat Danish she likes? If I'm going to be criticized for every little thing, I won't bother leaving her with you anymore. I thought I was doing you a favor since you're always so free.
Tom couldn't stay silent.
Doing you a favor? Sally had been taken care of, isn't her? You're out every week, and is it your right attitude?
Tom was right. I knew Jane sometimes canceled her plans for Sally. Realizing Betty brought her over with such intentions made me feel sorry for Sally. Jane couldn't stay quiet either.
What do you think Sally is? Aren't you her mother? It's not okay to leave your child every week to have fun. Have you ever really thought about her picky eating? It won't get better by ignoring it. She barely plays outside, right? Her skin is so pale in the summer.
Betty was furious at this.
Girls should have white skin, and being small is cuter. Playing outside would make me tan too. It's just a cake, and you're blowing this out of proportion. You guys are creepy family.
I had been silent about something until now.
Betty had frequently harassed me.
For example, she secretly added a lot of salt to the food I made, making it too much salty. And some of the accessories I bought during my single days disappeared from our house. I seized the moment to reveal everything. Betty became quiet and embarrassed. Tom was shocked and kept apologizing. The atmosphere was far from celebratory. Tom revealed that he had seen unfamiliar accessories at their home. Betty quieted down after this.
I just borrowed them, that's all. You're making a big deal out of nothing.
Betty's excuses were painfully inadequate. Then, Sally spoke up.
Mom, it's not nice to be mean. If you want something from a friend, you have to ask. My kindergarten teacher said so. If you make a mistake, just say sorry and you can be friends again. If you made a mistake, Mom, just say sorry and it'll be okay. Everyone was instantly soothed by Sally's words.
Tom and his family understandably felt uncomfortable. Tom then said,
Maybe we should go home today.
He suggested. But I knew leaving now wouldn't be good.
It would make it awkward next time.
I insisted they stay.
I didn't want this milestone birthday party to end on a sour note.
I hurried to the fridge. I thought about what I could make with the leftovers from yesterday. Luckily, there was still cream and fruit.
There was still time.
I quickly shifted to hosting a crepe party. We had appetizers and steaks, too. I invited Sally to help me for making crepes. Sally was in a great mood again. Everyone was soothed by her cheerfulness, which helped them reset their emotions. The 60th birthday party for Jane finally started. Betty looked uncomfortable, but today was about celebrating Jane. We all enjoyed steaks, gave presents, and ate crepes. Sally's cheerful demeanor was soothing to everyone.
Children are angels, really.
I later learned that Betty had been quite domineering at home too. Since that incident, she had become much more subdued. In a way, it was a good opportunity, I think. This incident shed light on aspects that were previously unseen. Betty had a habit of overspending, indulging in daily lunches with her friends. Tom confronted her and learned everything. As a result, Tom took over managing their finances, which put an end to her extravagant spending. With less to do at home, Tom encouraged her to start a part-time job. It seemed she's finally feeling the challenges of working outside. It had been a long time since she had worked outside. At her part-time job, a veteran employee told her,
Someone with such a long break is not useful. It's not worth the hourly wage if you can't learn quickly. Get up to speed and become competent.
It appeared she was being trained quite rigorously. When she returns home unable to do much because of exhausted.
Naturally, she's not making homemade organic meals anymore.
Their reliance on prepared food from supermarkets were increased. However, there was a positive side to this change.
Sally started eating a lot more.
She was no longer interested in Danish, but in hamburgers, pizzas, and chicken tenders. It seems she had never enjoyed such kid-friendly meals before.
Children generally don't favor organic or low-carb diets.
Now, Sally says,
"For my birthday, I want to eat store-bought hamburgers and fried chicken."
Her appetite has improved.
While junk food isn't great every day, but enjoying what you eat is important. Enjoying food is also a part of food education.
Betty used to post about her organic dishes on social media. They were always stylishly presented, regardless of taste.
But after this incident, she stopped doing that.
It seems she was seeking validation through social media likes. It's the best for being stopped.
She's lucky she didn't end up in divorced.
Since that day, Betty has awkwardly stopped visiting. Now, Tom brings Sally over by himself.
Sally seemed more relaxed and free, even enjoying snacks now.
She appeared noticeably brighter and happier. And Jane is also happy to see the peace. As for us, we continue to live happily with Jane. And now, I'm expecting our first child.
The whole family is overjoyed.
We're all busy preparing baby items for the new addition. I hope we continue to live as a happy family.